ReZero Starting Life in Another World Volume 10, this time with the mysterious witch Echidna on the cover. This cover is great, it's very dark and creepy, and even the volume number and title are white instead of the usual black, so it really stands out among the other covers. I know that light novel volumes have to be somewhat standardized because of marketing purposes, but I really wish that more covers would stand out and feel special just like this one for volume 10. Now, and this is a nitpick, but this cover does a great job at creating this creepy, eerie atmosphere, and then Echidna's face just looks way too cute in this. I know that ReZero's art style is generally cutesy and not as rough or creepy as something like Overlord, for example, but I think that this could have been a little bit better. For example, you have characters like Elsa who look beautiful but creepy at the same time. There's just something about Echidna's face, it looks way too round. I'm not an art critic, I don't even know why I think that it's cute, but it just, I get way too passionate on these covers. Let's move on. Volume 10 marks the beginning of Arc 4, and for this video I want to do something a little bit different. As some of you know, I mentioned it in the comments, I have only read up until the end of Arc 4. To be completely precise, I did read Volume 16, but not beyond that. So for this video, I want to give my general overview of Arc 4, and then throughout these videos, see if my opinion changes or if it stays the same. And for the less than 0.0001% of people that may be watching these videos without having read the light novels, don't worry, I will not be giving out any spoilers, so you can watch without any problems. Now, regarding Arc 4, to me Arc 4 is an arc that has a great ending and great emotional climaxes, but it's a little bit too convoluted and suffers from excessive plot points that feel unnecessary. We've had more straightforward arcs like Arc 1 where the only real enemy was Elsa, we've had arcs like Arc 3 where Subaru had to contend with multiple enemies, namely Betelgeuse, the Witch Cult and the White Whale, and here in Arc 4 he also has his hands full of problems, and that's not a bad thing, that's actually a good thing, because the harder the main protagonist's life is, the more entertaining it is for the reader. My main problem with Arc 4 is that it feels bloated with plot contrivances that the author adds just to justify the outcomes that he wants. Let me put this in another way. It is very obvious, in fact the author even says it in some of his afterwords, that he already knows the ending and emotional moments for each arc and perhaps for the whole series. Arc 4 is an arc focused on character development, and not only for Subaru this time, but for the surrounding cast. It has a lot of major character development, even for characters like Garfiel that we meet for the first time here in Volume 10. And character development is what I like about Arc 4. In fact, I don't think that starting with the end in mind is a bad thing. I can't even count how many anime I've watched that start out with a great premise and then just fizzle out into a disappointing ending. My problem here is that this arc feels very reverse engineered. A lot of characters cannot move, a lot of things are constrained and manipulated to set up the moments that the author wants. Characters cannot physically leave the sanctuary, others have hidden motivations and agendas, and others cannot act because of vows. Every time a character could be useful or provide a solution or share some important information, it always feels like there's some weird excuse like, oh, I can't, I have a vow, or something like that. Narratively speaking, the story feels contrived, with too much going on and too much to keep track of. Like, why couldn't this character do this again? Like, what was the excuse? For that reason, Arc 4 is one that I recommend you either binge read or binge watch. For those that watch the anime seasonally, a lot of people kept forgetting things because it's just a little bit too much. Having said all this, I still like Arc 4, I think the ending's amazing, it really bangs, it's so good, but the path to get there is a little bit rocky in my opinion. If it was any other series, I would have immensely enjoyed Arc 4 because, as I said, it has great emotional payoffs, but since it's ReZero and it followed up Arc 3, which I loved, I think it negatively affected my opinion of Arc 4. So there you have it. In a nutshell, that is my opinion of Arc 4. Great moments, not so great throughout. I like it, but I like it less than Arc 3. Now let's see if throughout these reviews of me rereading the volumes, let's see if my opinion changes and I appreciate it more, or if it just stays the same. If you agree or disagree with me, be sure to leave a comment. I know there are people that love Arc 4 and I can understand why. I just wish that the writing was a little bit tighter in these early volumes. Okay, now that I have given perhaps what is the longest and most controversial intro to one of these videos, let's get right into Volume 10, starting with the changes in the cast. Patlash, our favorite land dragon, is now officially part of the crew. Yay! As a gift from Krush for his valiant effort against the white whale in the witch cult, Subaru gets to keep Patlash as his land dragon permanently, so that's a good thing. The relationship between Patlash and Subaru is very wholesome. Patlash is fiercely loyal as seen in Arc 3 despite being of a very proud breed. Subaru even jokes that maybe he saved Patlash in a past life, which in this series I never know what's a real joke and what's an important tidbit of information for later, so just keep that in mind. That was something that was said. I find it funny that usually these types of pet relationships in fiction are usually dogs or direwolves if you're in Game of Thrones. Here Subaru gets a whole land dragon, which, as we've seen previously, is way more useful than a dog. We also get the unofficially official introduction of Otto to the crew. While he's still not been declared as part of the Emilia camp, he is increasingly relevant in this volume and you can sense he's here to stay. In the words of Subaru himself, he says, "You're our crew's Mr. Dependable Merchant, I'm counting on you," to which Otto replies, "Wait, since when have you arbitrarily lumped me in with your faction?" Otto is this kind of meek, bland guy that gets made fun of a lot by Subaru and the other characters. At one point Subaru even suggests, jokingly of course, that Otto be thrown into the Roswaal Mansion's dungeon, which would be very funny actually. Even Petra makes fun of him, referring to him only as noisy person, and then there's this moment which, as far as I can recall, it's unique in the ReZero series. Otto was the only one whose presence seemed tentative and not strictly necessary, but setting that aside, I think this is the first and only line where the narrator himself makes fun almost directly of someone other than Subaru. It almost feels like even the author is making fun of Otto. Still, even as early as volume 10, you can see that Otto cares a lot more for Subaru and the rest of the crew than he should, and he's not as Machiavellian as the other merchants, for example Anastasia or Russell Fellow. Deep down, he's a good guy. In this volume, Otto is mostly a comic relief character, but in the next few volumes that may change, who knows. Speaking of Petra, she is a standout from the village children. She gains a more prominent role in Arc 4, becoming one of the mansion's maids. I like this addition. In a way, it's done to fill the emotional void that Ram left in the mansion. Additionally, this evolves Petra into an actual character. As I said in previous videos, the village characters are tertiary at best and not very well developed. In fact, I couldn't really tell you anything not surface level about them because there's nothing to be said, at least in these main volumes. It's very funny that despite being so young, Petra is already more proficient at housework than Subaru, but hey, at least Subaru is very good at sewing. I guess that will come in handy when one of the archbishops is secretly weak to needles or something. But then again, that would make Subaru useful in combat, which you know is not the author's style. For new characters, first we have Frederica, this lovely maid with scary teeth. In volume 10, she is very reserved. She clearly knows more than she lets on. I wish Frederica had told us more about it in detail, but she said she was constrained by a vow not to speak about the sanctuary, so it couldn't be helped. She starts off as an ally, and yet by the end of the book you are led to believe she is somehow scheming something, yet she never comes off quite as a villain or as a manipulator, so it's very hard for me to treat Frederica as a threat. At one point, Ram even says that she trusts Frederica despite all the suspicions, so it's weird. Why does the author make it so obvious that Frederica is a red herring? Why even waste time with this subplot at all? This is one perfect example of something I said earlier, where this arc feels bloated with small plot points that, in my opinion, don't add much to the story or to the characters themselves. You could say that it's Roswaal somehow trying to manipulate Subaru into suspecting Frederica, but even Roswaal in this volume comes off as very evil and untrustworthy, so it's hard for the reader to really trust anything that he says. Moving on, another new character is Garfiel. Every story needs a meathead character that punches first and asks questions later, and Garfiel is very good at that. Garfiel is a shonen protagonist from another story. He's impulsive, a loudmouth, very strong, and has a quirky personality. His quirky personality is talking in these weird idioms that don't make any sense, but somehow you still understand what he means. It's almost like talking with a child. I have no idea what you just said there, little buddy, but somehow I get what you mean. Garfiel, along with Roswaal, to me, are two of the pillars of this arc. The situation that Subaru finds himself in is very interesting. You have Garfiel, Roswaal, and Subaru all have their own agendas, and there's this sort of Venn diagram where their interests intersect, but they all have their own motivations. There's always a sucker in the room, and in this room, Subaru is without any doubt the sucker, as the other two characters have way more information about what's going on, and clearly Subaru is the one grasping at straws here. I really like how villainous Roswaal comes across in Volume 10. It's the first time that he and Subaru really have an honest conversation, and he comes across as a complete psychopath. He will sacrifice anyone without any remorse just to achieve his objectives, and for some weird reason, he seems to really trust Subaru a lot. So in just a short dialogue, Roswaal manages to set himself up as the biggest mystery in Arc 4. Is he on Subaru and Emilia's side? Is he against them? And does he even realize how wrong his methods are? Garfiel, on the other hand, seems much more reasonable despite being such a hothead. Still, he is by no means a friendly character. He is very aggressive towards our main characters and has his own motivations. His own loyalty to Roswaal seems to be performative in a way. He comes across as a very volatile character that should not be underestimated or messed with. Finally, the most intriguing new character is Echidna. Also, to that one Ryuzu fan, yes, she is here and has a few lines of dialogue, and we will be seeing more from her. Anyway, Echidna. What everyone's here for, the Witch of Greed, Echidna, a character so popular that even from her first volume she has her own promotional artwork in a schoolgirl outfit. Lovely. Echidna is a great character. Just like the ones I previously mentioned, she also has her own agenda and is clearly using Subaru, the difference being she is very friendly towards him and seems to be having a lot of fun. She's a witch, her presentation and demeanor are very villain-like, and yet she seems like one of the strongest allies that Subaru has in this arc. The relationship between the two is very funny. She's very amused by him and the things that he says despite her being a witch. She can't seem to comprehend him and she loves that. And Subaru seems grateful for her help, but doesn't take her nearly as seriously as he should. Every time he's like, okay, I get that you're the most knowledgeable person in this world, but I gotta go help my girl Emilia, bye bye. Echidna's trial is very interesting in the reflection of her character. When Subaru successfully completes the trial, she's almost disappointed because she wanted to see more. She's just naturally curious, she just craves more knowledge. I also find it very interesting that she does not care if you accept or reject your past. She only wants you to arrive at your own answer. She's not here to help you, she's just here to entertain herself. How greedy of her. One final note regarding the changes in the cast is that we gained a lot of new characters, but we have effectively lost one major character. Of course, I'm talking about Rem. She's not gone, but she's in a coma and not coming back for the foreseeable future. This creates a very interesting dynamic where our main character's pillar of emotional support is gone. This adds to the tension of Arc 4. Our main character must navigate this confusing situation where he doesn't really know who to trust and his biggest ally is gone. That's why a character like Echidna stands out as very helpful, because now he has fewer characters that he can turn to. Subaru's inner dialogue also changes a bit. Before he was generally insecure, but now he is very regretful, and the story constantly reminds him that no one except for him can remember Rem, and that stings even more. Speaking of our main character Subaru, despite all the new and cool side characters, Subaru's role is still very prominent in Volume 10, and I want to highlight 3 specific moments that in my opinion best reflect his growth. The first is right at the beginning of the book when Subaru and Emilia are discussing going into the sanctuary. By the flow of conversation, Subaru incorrectly assumes that Emilia wants to leave him behind. This is quickly corrected as Emilia says words that have a lot of weight after Arc 3, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Of course I'm not leaving you here, come with me, I'd be worried sick on my own." Out of context, this may seem like the typical damsel in distress, but for ReZero readers you know how important this is. Emilia now trusts Subaru more, and despite his recklessness, which he still has, she now knows that he truly loves her and cares for her and wants to save her and all the others. Subaru also strongly pushes back against staying behind. Because he learned his lesson from last time, he doesn't want to break any vows or make any promises that he cannot keep. He doesn't want to hurt Emilia's feelings again, so he wants to make his position very clear right from the start and not simply lie his way out of everything and just do whatever he wants regardless of what he promised. It's also implied that after losing Rem, he doesn't want to lose anyone anymore, so if anything, he is even more protective of Emilia now than he was before. The second moment is when talking with Roswaal. He says, "Wait, let's put what we want to ask about in proper order. I feel like we're just gonna be running around in circles at this rate. We need to get to a conclusion." To which Roswaal replies, a most sound suggestion. It seems that our good Subaru's mental state has changed since I last saw him. Subaru has matured a lot since Arc 3. He has learned from his impulsiveness and recklessness from before. He is still a flawed human being, but now he knows how to set his priorities straight, especially when people's lives are at stake. The third and final moment I want to highlight is obviously Subaru's trial. It's a deep dive into Subaru's psyche and why he acted the way he did. In a way, it's hilarious that it took us 10 volumes for us to get the backstory of our main character, but that's the light novel medium for you. There were more pressing concerns to attend. Subaru's backstory is very humanizing. Even if you haven't gone through this specific situation, he deals with a lot of things that are very personal and that everyone goes through, such as struggling to fit in, the anxiety of knowing you are not doing what you should be doing, and the crushing feeling of high expectations. We can see that a lot of Subaru's insecurities came from comparing himself to his own father, and I quite like this one line in one of his monologues. After that, it was just a drag. I skipped 1 day a week, then it was once every 3 days, then once every 2. It didn't even take 3 months before I stopped going to school altogether. This really hits home, as bad habits can compound extremely fast, and once you look around, you have just lost control of your life. Him talking with his parents and being open with them after being encouraged by Rem's words no less was such a tender moment it even made my cold heart a little bit warm. Also, as a side note, both of his parents are really funny, especially his mother. She's so calm and naive and just says the most random things. She made me smile a lot while reading Volume 10. Subaru's trial was to me the highlight of Volume 10, a great moment of character growth for Subaru, and honestly a chapter that you could even read without context and still appreciate. It's that good. Now, for my overall thoughts on Volume 10. Volume 10 sets up Arc 4 by overloading the reader with information and leaving him just as confused as our main character. This can be a good thing as it leaves the reader interested, but it also can be a little bit overwhelming for some. Then they present all these morally grey characters like Roswaal and Echidna and Garfiel, and they just leave the reader even more confused or maybe interested. Who can Subaru trust? Where is this all going? To top it off, the volume ends with one of the most surprising and out-of-nowhere cliffhangers in the entire series. The Bowel Hunter Elsa is back, and she's one of my favorite villains, so I'm not complaining, I love this. My main critique, as I said in the beginning of this video, is that they could cut some of the fluff in Arc 4 and it would still be as good if not better, but let's see if my opinion changes once I reread the next few volumes. I love Subaru's trial, but as a whole this volume feels like a big information dump, which makes sense as it's the first volume of Arc 4, so I guess it's doing what it's meant to do. This was it for me today, folks. I didn't even have time to talk about Emilia or Beatrice, which are also very relevant, but don't worry, their time will come in the next few volumes. As for my MVP, if we're being honest, this volume is very uneventful, so I guess the only real candidates are Subaru's parents for being so supportive, Echidna for being a great tea party host, and Elsa for the awesome cliffhanger. Let's go with the popular choice. My MVP for Volume 10 is the lady on the cover, the Witch of Greed, Echidna. Let's hope she can continue to entertain us with her awesome trials and her bodily fluids. See you guys on Volume 11. Bye bye.